Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio, sponsored by EarthX, the world's largest environmental experience, and also sponsored by Natural Awakenings magazine. Live your healthiest life on a healthier planet. Now, here's your host, Bernice Butler.
Welcome to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. We are now beginning our fourth season, and we remain just as excited as ever to continue to help you explore and understand that unbreakable relationship between your health and the health of the planet. Here we look at the hottest topics related to our environment and its sustainability and how they affect your health and wellness. Here, issues like climate change, plastic pollution, extreme weather events, and others will meet up with everyday impacts like allergies and asthma, digestive issues and gut health, cancers, lung and heart issues, and more. So listen today as we interview experts for today's show on climate change, looking forward. The most promising and the emerging climate change mitigation. What are we doing about it? Now, the climate crisis is increasingly marching forward. But fortunately, there are many things we can do to ensure our future is as prosperous as possible. These actions fall into one of two broad categories. They are climate adaptation and climate change mitigation. And these terms go hand in hand while we navigate through the climate crisis, but they can mean very different things. Now, climate change mitigation means avoiding and reducing the emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere to prevent the planet from warming to the more extreme temperatures that we are beginning to see. And climate adaptation means altering our behavior, our systems, and in some cases, altering ways of life to protect our families, our economies, and the environment in which we live from the existing impacts of climate change. And the more we reduce emissions right now, then the easier it will be to adapt to the changes that we can no longer avoid. Mitigation actions will take a while to affect our rising temperatures. So, in the meantime, we must adapt now to the change that is already upon us and that will continue to affect us in the foreseeable future. Mitigation means using new technologies and renewable energies, making older equipment more energy efficient, or changing management practices or our consumer behavior. It can be as complex as a plan for a new city or as simple as improvements to our cook stove design. And efforts underway around the world range from the high-tech subway systems all the way to bicycling paths and walkways. The mitigation piece of the puzzle is fairly easy to explain, but much more difficult to accomplish. We must transition from powering our world with fossil fuels to using clean, renewable energy. And we need to stop clearing out and removing our forest and our densely wooded areas and restore our natural habitats until we reach a net zero carbon emissions. And this means that the amount of the greenhouse gases that are released into our atmosphere is at a balance with the capture and the storage of those gases in places like soil and tree roots. It's like investing in a retirement fund. The sooner we act to mitigate the impacts of climate change, then the better off we'll be in the future. And so far, the world has been a little slow to act, but momentum is shifting. The world is already experiencing changes in average temperatures. It's already experiencing shifts in the seasons and an increasing frequency of extreme weather events and other climate change impacts and slow onset of other events. The faster the climate changes, then the longer the adaptation efforts are put off and the more difficult and expensive it could be. Now, adaptation refers to adjustments in ecological, social, and economic systems in response to the actual or the expected impacts of climate change or other things that are stimulated by climate change. It refers to changes in our processes, practices, and structures to moderate potential damages or to benefit from the opportunities associated with climate change. And yeah, in some cases, there are some opportunities. In simple terms, countries and communities need to develop adaptation solutions, ways to adjust, ways to rework and or to modify the way we do things, and implement action to respond to the impacts of climate change that are already happening, as well as we need to prepare for future impacts. Climate change adaptation and mitigation are both equally important and both time sensitive, and we need to, of course, do both. While climate change is a global issue, it does affect each of us on a local kitchen table scale. We can all help to mitigate climate change by reducing our emissions in our own lives and by letting our representatives and our local governments know that we support climate change policies, and we also need to support businesses and organizations that embrace renewable energy. And there's a lot going on right now, and something more for everyone to do to move forward and make giant leaps forward in our efforts to stop climate change near or in its tracks, and to rethink or rework how we do some things and how we design other things in order to help ensure we can live a healthy life on a healthy planet. So there's a lot to talk about. And here today to help us explore and unpack some of this are three experts in varying or differing areas of climate change mitigation and adaptation. We have with us today Sam Calish. Sam leads special projects at Rewiring America with a focus on unlocking opportunities and tackling thorny problems on the way to electrifying 1 billion machines. Sam is the founder of Elmworks, which is a startup developing manufacturing technologies for electrification, and he's a research fellow at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs Cyclotron Road Division through Activate. Sam has run projects with the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Office, and the Department of Energy's Building Technology Office. Welcome, Sam. And did I get all of that right?
Yes, thanks. Great to be here, Bernice. Appreciate the intro.
And I'm glad that you could join us, albeit you're going to have to leave before we're done, but we're so happy to have you. Our other guest is Debora Lay. Debora is Economic Affairs Officer of the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Debbie is a lead author of the IPCC's, which is the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. She's the lead author of their 6th Assessment Report Working Group, which is about impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. And she's the lead author of the IPCC's Special Report on Global Warming at 1.5 degrees centigrade, focusing on adaptation, sustainable development, and renewable energy. Welcome, Debbie. Did I get all of that right?
Yes, all that is correct, and happy to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us again today, Debbie. And our other guest is Linda Rudolph. Linda is a public health physician with decades of leadership experience in local and state government and with nonprofit organizations. She currently serves as a senior advisor on climate, health, and equity for the Public Health Institute and for the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And Linda works to advance public policies that promote health equity and address the climate health emergency. Welcome, Linda. Did I get all of that right?
You did. Thank you so much for doing this.
And again, thank you all for making time. I know everybody was busy, and we really had to do a lot of hoop jumping to get everybody here, but we're so glad. And we just have about 3 minutes before we go to break, but I am going to start with Sam. And Sam, I believe you were involved in helping to write some of the Biden administration's legislation or provide information on the climate change-related part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you tell us about that? And what were the goals being pursued in the legislation that you worked on?
Sure. Yeah, that's a big topic. But yeah, I mean, the main goals were to get as close as possible to the very aggressive target that the Biden administration set, which is a 50% emissions reduction by year 2030. Extremely aggressive target, and to try to push as much of that through the narrow majority that was held in the Senate. And so I'm part of an organization called Rewiring America, as you mentioned, and what we focus on is what's called electrification, which is shifting all of the uses that we have in our economy of fossil fuels to run on electricity instead of those fossil fuels like gasoline, natural gas, and oil. Because of technological breakthroughs, we now have viable alternatives for all of those things. There are electric vehicles instead of gasoline cars. There are electric heat pumps that keep your house really comfortable instead of gas furnaces. But we need to be adopting those technologies as quickly as possible to drive down emissions. And so a lot of what we worked on in the Inflation Reduction Act was making sure that sort of American households, everyday Americans, had access to those technologies. A lot of previous government incentive work relied on tax credits, which tends to neglect lower income bracket households. We worked really hard to get rebate programs in place that are available to those households.
Okay, so I do like the rebates as opposed to tax credit, which means it's available fairly immediately. And we just have 1 minute to go, Sam. But before we go to break, can you just maybe call out or list some of those things that everybody's using every day and may not think of that are currently fossil fuel powered that we need to and want to and can get to electrification?
Absolutely. So I'll say the full list is available on our website at rewiringamerica.org. We've put together a calculator that lets you know how much money you can qualify for in the Inflation Reduction Act. But just real quick, these are things like putting solar panels on your house, getting an electric vehicle, getting an electric heat pump to heat and cool your home, getting a new water heater that runs on electricity, an electric heat pump to heat your water, clothes dryers, and all of the electrical wiring upgrades to your home that's required to install those systems.
So basically, the home should not have any gas, so to speak.
So that's the goal. It's going to take a while to get there. But what we want people to do is be ready when their water heater breaks. Instead of buying a new gas water heater, be ready to buy that electric water heater. You don't have to run out today. You just have to be ready when it breaks.
Indeed, and I think that makes sense to put it on their minds. And then I know, and we'll talk about this more, then other things and other incentives and people are working on the back end then to get that electricity provider to do the right thing. We're going to go ahead and go to break, and we'll be right back on the other side with Sam Calish, with Debbie Lay, and Linda Rudolph. Thank you all. We'll be right back. We want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex Magazine, the Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods markets, natural grocers, Central Market, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Check them out. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. Check them out at nhg.com. And our other sponsor is Lynn Dental Care. Practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, non-mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. To today's show on climate change, looking forward, the most promising and emerging climate change mitigation, and what are we doing about it? What are we doing about climate change, that is? And we are back with some very smart people who are going to make us a modicum of the smart that they are. We are back with Sam Calish at Rewiring America, Debbie Lay with the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and with Linda Rudolph with the Public Health Institute and the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And again, thank you all for being with us. And Sam, I just want you to repeat once more about the list, and if you can email that to us, we're going to post it on our platforms. But the list that talks about the various appliances and methods of electrification and what people, it also gives some additional information.
Yeah. So once again, the website is rewiringamerica.org. I'll send you that so you can post it. And these rebates and tax incentives, they're a little complicated in terms of what you qualify for. So that's why we built this tool. You go in and put in some of your information. We don't collect any of it, but it just shows you what you qualify for, when the money is available, and kind of how to go about getting it.
So it's really good for everyone to have just a basic familiarity with the list. And that way, when things come up, because I know I recently just bought I have 2 AC units in my house, and I just recently had to replace one. I wasn't in time for the rebates that starts in 2023, but I know that now for the second one, which I'm told it's on its last leg. And so me and the rest of us should have a basic familiarity with the rebate items, such as you said, when it comes up, when it's time to replace, or we want to replace, then we know the direction to go in, as well as the rebates or other incentives that are available.
That's absolutely right. And I'll just add that, I think a lot of people hear rebate or tax credit and they think, maybe it's $100 or something. This is a lot of money. If you're a qualifying household, you can get up to $8,000 to install an electric heat pump. You can get $7,500 for an electric vehicle. You can get $2,000 for a heat pump water heater. This is a lot of money, so it really pays to check it out.
Those are amounts that move people, that move behavior. Yeah, I checked it out, and then I discovered it wasn't in effect yet until 2023. But I liked it, and I am on hold for when I have to replace that downstairs unit, and I've already priced it out. So if I'm eligible, which I haven't looked, I could get it for free. Thank you, Sam. Now, in terms of the legislation, do you feel that it really was able to, or will be able to, meet those goals? How did y'all tease that out?
Yeah, so there's a lot of modeling that goes into these predictions, and it's spread across multiple groups. So it's not just one group with one opinion about what's going to be effective. It's a consensus-based approach. And as modeled, there's some uncertainty, but the Inflation Reduction Act by itself will get us nearly to the 50% reduction. Then we fully expect there will be additional private sector engagement as kind of the market transforms and businesses pop up to take advantage of new opportunities that will get us to the 50% reduction.
So in this 7.5 years, during which we want to get through to 50% reduction, what would you say are perhaps the most significant incentives for the private sector to come on board with this?
So there's a lot of these. One that I'll call out is the DOE, the Department of Energy, has a department called the Loans Program Office, and those provide government-backed loans for private entities to go and do projects that help meet these goals. There's $100 billion in that fund. That's a lot of money, and when it's taken as a loan guarantee, that helps catalyze even more money to flow in the private markets. And so these programs are going to really help catalyze the market.
Indeed. And I know you have to run shortly, Sam. So can you tell us some more about Rewiring America, how and why it got started? And then most importantly, it's where you focus on problems and opportunities related to electrifying, you say, 1 billion machines. And so what is your initial focus in terms of those machines to electrify?
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best to answer it. The Rewiring America got started to promote electrification because it was not a widely known concept at the time, or likely even today. It's really not widely known. And what it means is that due to technological advances, acting on climate change doesn't look like it used to. It used to be like, okay, if you put on, Jimmy Carter said, put on a sweater, turn your thermostat down, and that's the best tool we have in our toolbox to combat climate change. That's not true anymore. We don't have to get by with less. What we need to do is transform where we get our energy from. So instead of getting our energy from fossil fuels, we can get it from electricity. Now, we still have to generate that electricity, but wind and solar, clean sources, are now the cheapest forms of new generation. They're cheaper than fossil fuels. And so as we drive additional demand for electricity, we can help accelerate the transition from fossil fuels to clean electricity. So as average Americans, as households, the best thing that we can do is transform our energy systems to run on electricity. And this is why Rewiring America got started, to help promote this vision and to help people understand that can actually improve their lives. Every couple weeks, there's a new study that comes out that talks about the harmful health effects of burning gas to cook inside of our home. It increases rates of childhood asthma. It's like the list goes on and on. Electric induction stoves are amazing. They're a better cooking experience, and they avoid these harmful health effects. So by electrifying, we have all these other effects that really improve quality of life, lower bills, create jobs. And so this is the largest vision that Rewiring America is trying to kind of get out in the popular understanding.
So what opportunities have you all uncovered? Because you said in your that part of what y'all do is you tackle the thorny problems and you uncover opportunities. So what have been some of the more significant opportunities you all have uncovered during this electrification process?
Sure. So the biggest opportunity comes from the inherent efficiency of electric machines. In a gas car, 80% of the energy that's in the gasoline gets thrown away, and only 20% makes it to the wheels. In an electric vehicle, over 90% makes it to the wheels. Because of that, they're just cheaper to operate. They're cheaper to operate, cheaper to maintain. In the face of rising gasoline prices, $5, $6, $7 a gallon, even depending where you are, the equivalent cost per gallon to drive an electric vehicle is $1.06. That's a massive opportunity to save people money and to help them meet their needs that, someone can't just wake up and say they're not going to go to work on a given day because gas prices are too high. You got to go to work. And so electric vehicles and other electric technologies provide a massive opportunity to help people get off this roller coaster ride of fossil fuel prices.
What about maintenance? It seems like that's one of the things that should be pushed or that can be a big enough economic benefit to maybe move the needle in terms of maintenance for electric vehicles compared to maintenance for fossil fuel vehicles.
Yeah. So the best reports that are coming out today suggest that it costs about half to maintain an electric vehicle as it does to a gas-powered car. And that's simply because there's no oil changes, there's fewer moving parts, fewer things to wear out and maintain.
Sam, thank you so much. We know you have to leave. Thank you for being with us, and we really do appreciate it. I want to move now to Debbie. As an author of the 2022 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment Report, and again, author on the Impacts, Vulnerability, and Adaptation section, would you give us a summary of your findings and what were the more significant recommendations you all made?
Yes, thank you, Bernice. So as has been mentioned before, with the increasing global warming levels, the impacts will continue to worsen, and several events such as tropical cyclones will continue to be more intense and more frequent. So we will see it both with floods, with droughts, for example, changes in rainfall patterns. So that will have significant consequences, especially with water and food security and human health and the ecosystem as well. But the report also mentions different adaptation options that we can implement now. But we also know that if we don't act soon, the window of opportunity to implement action will close because systems will reach a limit, meaning that they will change so significantly that the changes will be irreversible. So our adaptation mechanisms are strongly tied to emissions reductions efforts. So in the measure in which we stringently reduce emissions, we will be better to adapt. So the key message of Working Group 2 lands on climate resilient development pathways in which we integrate mitigation and adaptation in support of the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, and we're going to go to break, but right after the break, I want to continue this for you to explain to us what that means for the everyday person and why they should care that we're integrating mitigation and adaptation as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll be right back on the other side with Debbie Lay and Linda Rudolph. Thank you all. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. to today's show on climate change. Looking forward, the most promising and emerging climate change mitigation, and what are we doing about it now? We are back with Debbie Lay. And Debbie is with the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and with Linda Rudolph, and she is with the Public Health Institute and the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And they are making us smarter. Now, right before the break, Debbie, you were telling us about the significant findings of your Working Group 2 on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. And you stated that your goal was to integrate mitigation and adaptation overlaid or as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals. Tell us about what that means to ordinary people in their everyday lives and why should they care about that?
Yes, thank you, Bernice, for the question. There are options that, while they reduce emissions, they increase risk, and also adaptation options that, while reducing risk, can increase emissions. So what we need is to achieve a balance, maximizing the co-benefits, but when we identify trade-offs, to also address them. So, for example, when we talk about human health and with heat stress, with the different heat waves, an adaptation measure is to use air conditioning. But air conditioning increases emissions because we use more electricity. On the other hand, on the side of mitigation, in some countries, in working with different renewable energy sources, or even wherever you put an electricity generation plant, if they're rural indigenous communities, there sometimes can be social conflicts depending on how the project is approached. There are other mitigation options such as bioenergy, or when we opt for more advanced technologies like carbon capture and storage that use large amounts of land but also significant amounts of water. So it puts ecosystems at risk because we're in land competition and water competition. So that means increasing food security and water security issues.
I want to go to Linda now. Linda, as a physician and working with organizations that represent them, will you tell us what concerns you all most about climate change in efforts to mitigate and adapt?
Doctors and nurses and health professionals around the world know that climate change really is a health emergency. We're seeing the effects of climate change on people here in many ways. We're seeing heat illness and deaths from extreme heat. We're seeing lung and heart impacts from wildfire smoke. We're seeing increases in vector-borne diseases like Lyme disease or West Nile virus. We're seeing injuries and displacement from people's homes from extreme storms and flooding, more challenges with access to clean drinking water, failing crops that are making food prices rise. And we're seeing more and more people, especially young people, who are experiencing mental health impacts like anxiety and depression because of concerns about climate change and the future. And we're seeing these effects especially in our most vulnerable populations, seniors, children, pregnant people, communities of color and low-income communities, and some workers, like farm workers who have to be out there, picking crops for us to eat in extreme heat or in the middle of bad wildfire smoke. So we know that climate change is affecting our health, and we also know that climate solutions are really good for our health, and that's why I'm so excited to hear Sam talking about his efforts with his colleagues to push for climate solutions that will also really increase our health and well-being in communities everywhere.
And Linda, how is it affecting our public health, both long-term and short-term?
Well, there's really sort of two aspects of that. One is that the same things that are causing climate pollution are also causing adverse impacts on our health right now. So when we burn fossil coal, gas, and oil to heat or cool our houses or to cook on our gas stoves or to drive the cars and trucks that we use to get around, we're also creating air pollution. We're creating climate change from carbon dioxide and other climate pollution. but we're also creating air pollution that causes asthma attacks and heart disease and poor birth outcomes and many thousands of premature deaths every year. So if we clean up our energy system and we electrify our cars and our trucks and our homes and use clean, renewable energy to produce our electricity, we will get huge health benefits in our communities. And, that's not the only way. Right now, a lot of the air pollution we have comes from our cars and trucks. But the other thing that our cars and trucks that, being so committed to cars does is it creates obesity and diabetes and osteoporosis and other chronic illnesses because people aren't walking and biking to school and work. And we know that if we reduce air pollution from transportation by making it easier for people to use public transit and walk and bike, we'll get huge physical activity benefits and reduce diabetes and heart disease and increase our mental health. So, there's just so many ways in which if we take action on climate change, we'll see the climate benefits for our children and our grandchildren, and we'll see the health benefits very quickly.
Indeed, getting rid of fossil fuel driven cars or minimizing the use of cars in general has a multiplicity of health benefits, not just from the climate change driven health impacts. Now, Linda, though, on a public health basis, I think the public knows, you saw public health that was leading the way on inoculation back in the day against, the diphtheria, smallpox, those things. And most recently, we saw public health leading the way in terms of COVID vaccine. Is there any adaptation or mitigation that our public health industry is doing or pushing or leading the way on as it relates to some of these climate change impacts on health?
Yes. First of all, we know that many hospitals and healthcare systems are working to reduce their own emissions by shifting to clean energy because the healthcare sector is very energy intensive. The other thing is that doctors and public health leaders across the country are advocating for the policies that we know are going to make a difference for our health and for the climate. And that's at a local level and at a state level and at a federal level and in the international arena that Debbie is working in, and trying to make sure that our climate solutions are also solutions that promote health and health equity. We're also looking at, how can we make sure that in every community there's places that people can go where they can get cooling and they can get clean air during an extreme heat wave or during a lot of wildfires. How can we create these resilience hubs that serve people in the community and also promote social cohesion for, a feeling of being together in the community, which we know makes a really big difference in terms of how communities can come together and rebuild and thrive after a climate-related disaster. And then we're also pushing for things like putting more trees in our communities so that people have more shade and more healthy places to gather together and so on.
Indeed, and I think those are certainly necessary actions. I think, though, I would like to see our doctors there at the point of those heat-related deaths, beating the drum that this is climate change caused, or at the point of a lot of those health events, beating that drum so that there's a firmer and more direct and steady connection between health impacts and climate change. But I am beginning to see almost all of the physician-related organizations and groups have a chapter or an effort that does deal with climate change. I just would like to see them be much more public and much more publicly connect the dots. Because when they connect the dots, I think everybody will get it. We're going to go ahead and go to break. But after the break, we're going to come back to Debbie to let her talk about some of the things that the report has recommended. We'll be right back on the other side. And we want to give a shout out now to our sponsors. That is Natural Awakenings, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex Magazine, The Green, Healthy, and Sustainable Living Authority for the DFW DFW Metroplex and North Texas communities. Print issues of Natural Awakenings can be found in all Whole Foods markets, natural grocers, Central Market, sunflower shops, and many, many other locations, as well as available free for download online at nadallas.com. Our other sponsor is North Haven Gardens, serving the Metroplex since 1951, the most respected horticultural establishment in North Texas, offering gardening and plant education, concierge services, DIY classes, gifts, and more. Check them out at nhg.com. And our other sponsor is Lynn Dental Care, practicing dentistry for over 38 years with a holistic approach, none mercury, looking at the whole body. Specializing in periodontics, Dr. Lynn is board certified by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. Check them out at lindentalcare.com. Thank you, sponsors. Welcome back to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio today. To today's show on climate change, looking forward, the most promising and emerging climate change mitigation, and what are we really doing about it? And we are back today with Debora Lay. She is with the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and with Linda Rudolph. And Linda is with the Public Health Institute and the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health. And earlier we had with us Sam Calish, who is with Rewiring America, and his team helped the Biden administration put together the language for the recently enacted legislation on inflation reduction that really was a lot about climate change mitigation and adaptation and rebates. So thank you all for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Now, before the break, I was calling upon Debbie to talk to us about what mitigation and adaptation specifics may have been recommended or cited in the the 2022 IPCC assessment report that she authored on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. Can you tell us about some of the most important synergies and trade-offs with adaptation and who is most affected by these?
Yes, thank you, Bernie. So in our assessment, we find that there are a number of options that have high levels of synergies between mitigation and adaptation, which means that they reduce risk. Among these are forest-based adaptation, agroecology, biodiversity management and ecosystem connectivity, and improved cropland management. But also topics like green and blue infrastructure in urban areas, improved resilience of critical infrastructure like energy reliability, and also of, as Linda was mentioning, health systems. So health systems are important, disaster risk management, and early warning systems. So we find a suite of options that have nexus positive linkages with the sustainable development goals that reduce emissions and reduce risk. But in those cases where there are trade-offs, the first step is to actually realize that we have those trade-offs to be better able to address them. But the other important thing is that we're not just talking about the options, but also on what are the enabling conditions that enable these options to happen. So an option doesn't happen in isolation. So I'll go back to the example of like public transportation or vehicles and how do you reduce vehicle use. And yes, we would like it to be electric, greener, not gas or diesel, but it's not just in putting the bus. It's like, where is the public lighting in the station? Where is the security in the stations? Because there are some countries where independently of the generation source of the vehicle, especially women will get robbed or assaulted or raped. And that will happen whether it's gas run or electric run. So we need to have integrated solutions and planning. So like in this case, where are your roads? Where, are you redesigning the routes of public transportation? Is there good security?
So Debbie, why should ordinary people in their everyday lives care about this? You did mention one of them in that, we want to move them to mass transportation. And I hear you saying one of the trade-offs is if we expect them to use that, then again, we're going to have to make it safe. Or as my mother always said, if you make things easy for people to do, they'll do it. What are some of the other trade-offs and synergies that you all found?
Among the main trade-offs, especially with the mitigation options, is those that require a lot of land. So when we talk, for example, about bioenergy, doing energy crops, we have competition with food security. So do you use the land to cultivate food for human consumption or animal consumption, or to generate electricity? Or when we talk about, for example, carbon capture and storage, we also require huge amounts of water. And when we have big droughts like the ones we're facing right now in the southwest of the U.S., among other places of the world, what is the best use you give to that water? So at the end, when we refer to climate resilience development is putting people at the center of the action, looking at where we make equitable and ethical decisions, not leaving anybody behind.
What are some real-life examples or changes that are in place or are imminently planned to show us how that looks and acts?
So in some developing countries, part of this of putting people at the center means, for example, incorporating more of traditional and indigenous knowledge in the decision making, listening to the perceptions of the users to what they feel about these options. Are they comfortable? And if not, why? And what can be done to make them more comfortable with certain technology? But it could also be, like when you go to a town hall meeting, making sure that everybody's voice is heard. I think that is important. And that's part of what guides these changes, that everybody have a say in these changes. So, for example, going back to the example of public transportation or urban planning, where are parks going to be located? Where the different services are?
Are there any examples that you can tell us about of projects or mitigation or adaptation efforts that changed or that were successful due to what you've just talked about, making sure that the people affected by it and near it their input is heard? Any examples you can give us of something that happened or changed or became very successful due to that?
Yes, there are some examples in developing countries and rural communities of how, for example, communities were able to adopt solar photovoltaic systems to power early warning systems or different disaster risk management. And we have found that has worked, but also in how rural communities are diversifying their income sources because their income is highly dependent on climate-sensitive crops.
And I think this makes a difference, and I've heard numbers of people say this to make sure that we do have that maximum input, and that way we have maximum benefits and effectiveness of our solutions. Debbie, and we just have a minute or so to go. Geographically, though, what are some of the most vulnerable areas for experiencing climate change impacts in the near or upcoming future?
Yes, certainly would be the small island nations, like in the Caribbean and the Pacific. We have Southeast Asia, for example, parts of Africa, and, for example, Central America.
Is it because I know that the Caribbean nations and other nations that are out in the water, I've heard a lot about that because the sea level is rising and it's eating up a lot of their land. And also that warm ocean is impacting some of their food sources and their fishing capabilities. And I think the others seem to be common. Is it places where it's already hot? It's getting hotter, or what?
As you mentioned, sea level rise is important, but also like in Central America, we get the tropical cyclones in the Atlantic and, from the Pacific and the Atlantic. So whether you call it the cyclone or the hurricane, our Atlantic and Pacific coasts are compromised. And then, for example, Central America has the dry corridor, which is increasing drought, with worsening drought levels. So, there are areas in Africa where agricultural land is now becoming desertified, which that means that land that used to be where you were able to have crops are now deserts. So you can't have crops, and now it increases food security. To answer your original question of why should everybody care, one way or another in the next years, we will all be impacted. And the drought, for example, that we have in the U.S. Southwest is an indication of that, of how many million people are being affected by that lack of water.
Indeed. And I think, and I don't think people realize, but that's a lot of our reason for our migration and the nationalism. People are leaving those areas where they can't grow food or can't get enough food, and they're going to others, and they're going in droves because the areas are big. Anyway, we do appreciate you being with us today, Debora, and helping us to understand this on a global level as well as a local level. So thank you so much. We're so glad that you're doing the work on the IPCC reports and sharing it with us to help us better understand. Thank you. We have been with Debora Lay with the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we've been with Linda Rudolph with the Public Health Institute and the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, and Sam Calish with Rewiring America. And they really have made us smarter in this short amount of time. So thank you. And thank you all for listening in today to Healthy Living, Healthy Planet Radio. The conversation starts here, but our goal is for it to continue in your home, in your social circles, your workplaces, at the water cooler, and in the grocery checkout line, so that we can all work together to realize that healthy living is simply not possible without a healthy planet. Our culture is a result of 1 trillion tiny acts taken by billions of people every day like yourselves. And each of these tiny acts can seem insignificant, but all of them add up, one way or the other, to the change that we each live through. This is your host, Bernice Butler. Thank you for listening in today, and join us again next week as we begin our series on extreme weather events. And I think all of us can identify with this. And listen to any of our past shows on podcast wherever you get yours. Thank you.